When I was 13 years old, my parents decided we were going to move to Irvine. And they bought a big house in Irvine, but they didn't know the color scheme. You know, back then you picked all your colors and your tile and your carpet and all that, and they were like conflicted. So they decided to go to Balboa Island and have lunch and figure out what color scheme they were going to have in their brand new house. Well, they go to a place called Van's Belgian Waffles, and my dad asked them, is this restaurant for sale? And the guy said yes. Ended up buying the restaurant right then and there at lunch. Yes, crazy. So then they drove back to Irvine and went from the biggest house to the smallest house because they weren't built yet, you know? You were buying one that's to fund this whole. So then they come home and go, guess what we did? I'm 13, I'm junior high, right? And they go, we just bought a restaurant on Balboa Island. And I'm looking at them going, 1974, 5, right in there. And I'm like, I'd never heard of Balboa Island. I was the one that had never been here because they came with my brothers when they were little. But when I was a little older, we did different things then. So that was my first exposure. I remember driving over the bridge for the first time with my parents and thinking, oh, this is like magical. It's like Disneyland. This was the coolest place I'd ever seen. And I couldn't believe I'd never been here in my entire life, right? We remodeled it ourselves. I mean, my brothers and myself and my parents, and it was interesting because when they had to dig up the flooring, and there was like layers of linoleum on top of each other and then tile under that, and sitting on buckets and hammers and chisels and getting. So we got to the point where there was a plumbing issue and they had to dig up. They actually found in the restaurant a pump that had been part of a gas station. The island. So at one point, there had to have been a gas station at 225 Marine. There's a lot of old history. A lot of things have happened over the years, you know. That's the building that eventually became Wilma's Patio. My mom and dad, they opened it as a different restaurant in the 70s. They were trying to copy the idea of back then, that's when Carl's Jr. started. And you would go up and you would order and they'd give you a number and you'd sit down and they'd bring it to you. So it was kind of like the crossover of fast food and dining. So my parents thought, oh, let's try that. Well, that flopped. Balboa Island did not want that. The people they had leased it to gave up the lease. So they decided, let's try it one more time. So they moved back down to the area. So there was a one-bedroom apartment above that restaurant on 225. So they moved in to the apartment, and this time they hired architects and the whole thing and completely remodeled the restaurant. And it came out really pretty. So they opened that in the 1982 September. Wilma's Patio, named at the architect named it. He thought that my mom hated her name.
Whoa, Flintstones.
Well, she was way before that time, but exactly, hated it. But the architect thought it'd be a good idea because it was a catchy, made you feel homey, you know, just saying Wilma's. So he named it Wilma's Patio, and this time this restaurant hit. There was a big recession then. Interest rates were like 18%. Everything was horrible. And I'm living in the valley, you know, and I'd been laid off twice and going to night school and the whole thing. So let's see, live in the valley, keep struggling, or move to the beach. Okay, so let's move to the beach. And my then boyfriend moved down here with me, who's now my husband. And we started working for my parents a couple months after Wilma's opened, and the rest is kind of history. We got real successful real quick and stayed really successful. This is what people wanted. They wanted a casual family restaurant. That time, that's when the Jolly Roger was kind of waning, and they were expanding pretty heavily and going into different restaurants, so they let the lease go in 85. We're just going crazy. I mean, we were getting hour waits and getting a lot of notoriety, and my mom and dad, you know, grew up on the farm in Colorado. They didn't have formal educations. just really hard workers. My dad was very much the personality, so he was on the floor every day and talking with people, and the locals ate it up. And then in 1996, my father very unexpectedly passed away, or 95 rather, and 96, a year later. So my mom and I ran it, and my husband. My mom was so stressed out and freaked out, and she's like, should we just close? Maybe we should just close. Maybe this is just the end. And an interesting thing happened. They cut my mom a deal, said, don't even pay me until you sell your building. So we moved in, and it took about 8-9 months to sell our building. And you'll never guess.
You did own your...
Oh, yeah, my mom and dad, they owned that. When they bought the restaurant, they bought the property, they bought everything. And guess who they sold the property to at that point? Shirley Pepys. Shirley bought the property from my mom and made it teddy bears and teacups. And so once the building sold, then we were able, to go into escrow with the Smith brothers. So that made my mom the second owner of that property since 1914, since they built the building. So that's pretty cool. It's a double lot, and it was a lot easier to make it compliant for the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we moved in, we closed the old Wilma's. And the day we closed, customers literally, they came and helped us move. They're grabbing all the chairs. They're walking down the street with their chairs, carrying the tables, carrying dishes. It was the funniest thing you've ever seen. 5 days later, Wilma's went from there to there, and it's like we grew up. Watching people come with their families, watching their families grow up, and then they keep coming back with their families. We had like 3 big families that came every single Sunday, and it was the Violas, the Vanesses, and the Rainies. And they were all related. They all grew up together in like Arcadia, but they all ended up in this area, and they would come every Sunday. And they would be like a party of 8 with their parents and their kids. And now they're like a party of 36 and they all still come, just not every single Sunday like they used to. But so that's kind of fun, watching everybody grow up. And I've seen a lot of that in the 37 years we've been open. Well, one of our original employees is still my cook. He's there today. His name's Hubinal Martinez, and my mom couldn't say Hubinal, so she called him Benny, and now his entire family calls him Benny. In my opinion, I think I have one of the most iconic buildings in Newport, between that and the pavilion, who ironically, guess who runs the pavilion now? The Salisbury family. So here we go again.